Hey, voice thing, can you check what's left in the fridge for dinner?
Hello, David. You are meant to be self-isolating.
I am. I'm in my car.
You are meant to be self-isolating at home.
What difference does it make? I'm isolated from people one way or another.
If you are unwilling to self-isolate at home for your own good, I will be forced to call authorities.
Oh, come on. What? I'm isolated in my car.
Initiating police isolation protocol in
Seriously?
5,
No, don't.
4, 3... Did you really think that would stop me? 2,
Wait, no,
1,
no.
initiate.
This is the story of your enslavement.
Evening to you. Lots to get to tonight. I'm Leon Hendricks. We want to start with new information into our newsroom. Within the past couple of hours, there are now 33 confirmed cases of the coronavirus in Michigan.
Yesterday we had 22 cases. Today we have 33 cases.
Friday.
We've also learned at least 33 people have died from COVID-19 complications.
33 more people have died due to the coronavirus in Illinois.
Coronavirus outbreak at the Latonia nursing home infects at least 33 residents. 7 of them have died, as David Winter found out.
Minnesota is reporting 33 new deaths, bringing the death toll to 1,148.
On a sad note, we have lost one patient in Nairobi. This now brings to 33 the total number of those who have succumbed to the disease.
Right now, Georgia is reporting a total of 99 cases in 19 counties. That is 33 new cases from just yesterday.
As the coronavirus cases continue to surge in India, the state of lockdown has been extended to 33 states and union territories.
This brings the total number of confirmed cases in the country to 33.
Where the number of sailors who have contracted the COVID-19 infection on a U.S. naval warship has almost nearly doubled, rising from 18 to 33. Now, this is the...
Egypt has recorded 33 new cases of the coronavirus.
Here is the latest coronavirus news. There are now 33 cases in Louisiana.
As expected, the number of cases of COVID-19 jumps. A total of 33 people in our state have been tested and are confirmed to have the coronavirus.
At Brentwood Place 1 in East Dallas, there are now 33 confirmed coronavirus cases.
The data we're presenting is a snapshot of time. However, we are aware of an additional 10 deaths that have happened, that have been reported through the local public health units. Press releases are online since this morning. That brings the total right now actually to 33 deaths that we're aware of, sadly. 33 deaths. 33 deaths. 33 deaths.
As the attack took place, Mr. Bush was on his way to an elementary school in Florida. When informed of the first plane hitting the World Trade Center, where terrorists had struck just 8 years prior, Mr. Bush decided to go ahead with his photo opportunity. Mr. Bush just sat there and continued to read My Pet Goat with the children.
Look at the letter at the end and remember the sound it makes. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get get ready to read this word the fast way. Get ready.
Kid.
Yes, kid. Sound it out. Get ready.
Kid.
Sound it out. Get ready.
Kid.
What word?
Kid.
Yes, kid. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready.
Seal.
What word?
Seal.
Yes, steal. Read these words the fast way. Get ready.
Play.
Yes, playing. Get ready.
Must.
Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake. Get ready.
Kite.
Yes, kite. Get ready.
Kit.
Yes, kit. Get ready.
Seal.
Yes, steal. Get ready.
Play.
Yes, playing. Get ready.
Must.
Yes, must. Boys and girls, speak your reader.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. You fool me, we can't get fooled again.
The Pet Goat, the story was called. In I, Pet Goat 2, Bush is portrayed in the classroom again with the teacher. There's students off screen here. And over to the side, you see outside the classroom, they also had a 9/11 attack happening, Twin Towers falling, but much more than just the Twin Towers falling. If you watch the video, you'll see all sorts of catastrophes, disasters, world war, nuclear explosions, and all sorts of things that are terrible. And so what the video is depicting is the second 9/11 style attack, but much larger and greater, and this includes the collapse of the United States of America. In this classroom, we have these students that are represented as moons. Each of these is a moon for a month, so we have 12 months. And so in this calendar, we'll call it a calendar, we have an eclipse. Girl is the lunar principle sitting on top of an eclipse. She is in the midst of the months that start from January to the far left and go all the way to December to the far right, going straight from left to right. First head you hit is going to be the next month. So the first month is January, then February, then March, and so on. Behind her is a rabbit called a buck. A male rabbit is a buck. We also have a buck over here. The buck is positioned here because that's the buck moon, the stag moon or buck moon, which is the first full moon after this eclipse. And the stag moon is always the full moon in July. Up until that part of the year, the grass looks fine. After that part of the year, you get wild ivy and vines. And here, if you look, the rabbit, the angry rabbit, is looking over here to this half of the year, the second half of the year. The only year that this calendar lines up with perfectly, including the barbed wire and all, is 2020. What we have then is the 2020 calendar, which has China with the yin yang and barbed wire in January, and then the rest of the world under lockdown after March, the March declaration by the World Health Organization that there is a global pandemic, and that in fact is what we see. A lockdown that was very tight in April, and varying degrees of lockdown continued to the end of the year. Some months look like they almost have no lockdown left, but it's there.
They're not just blowing things up, for example. These are going to be related to rituals, to their view of some sort of a proper way to get to the end or objective that they're after. And to understand that and to really have, if I can call it that, the key to understanding what's going on here, we need to understand how they're thinking about it and what's going on, because what they're doing is ritual magic, and they think somehow this ritual magic, these rituals are going to contribute to bringing about the outcome that they want in the ways that they think are necessary to do that.
Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. By the way, this report was produced by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Global Business Network in May of 2010. I'm going to skip down to page 18 and just read a few paragraphs and tell me if what we're seeing today isn't pretty much what they wanted all along. Page 18 starts, Lockstep, a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. Remember, this was written in 2010. They write, in 2012, the pandemic that the world has been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain originating from wild geese was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months. The majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. The pandemic blanketed the planet, though disproportionate numbers died in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central America, where the virus spread like wildfire in the absence of official containment protocols. But even in developed countries, containment was a challenge. The United States' initial policy of strongly discouraging citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency, accelerating the spread of the virus not just within the U.S., but across borders. However, a few countries did fare better, China in particular. Now remember, guys, this is just fiction. It's a projection written in 2010. They say the Chinese government's quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant near hermetic sealing off of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus from earlier than in other countries and enabling a swifter post-pandemic recovery. China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risk and exposure. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics to transnational terrorism, to environmental crises and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. Friends, I cannot stress enough how important a document like this is. It's truly a smoking gun of what we've been warned by Aaron Russo and others is coming. It's part of their plan. We've known it forever. How were they going to get it? It turns out a pandemic is the perfect way to garner more unilateral, unchecked power. Back to the document. At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. Citizens were more tolerant and even eager for top-down direction and oversight, and national leaders had more latitude to impose order in the ways they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms: biometric IDs for all citizens, for example, and tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interests. In many developed countries, enforced cooperation with a suite of new regulations and agreements slowly but steadily restored both order and, importantly, economic growth. So again, let's just review what's happened so far. A virus has been released, whether by accident or on purpose. You decide. Many have pointed to evidence that it is a bioweaponized virus, so more deadly than it otherwise would be. Whether that's true or not, you decide. But the end game is more unilateral power, more unchecked power, and more control by the government, by the corporations, and I would note, more bailouts for the banks. Now again, friends, that was from the 2010 document from the Rockefeller Foundation.
Coronavirus coverage and the mandatory mask order that's now in effect today concerning businesses.
If you're a business in Harris County that works with the public, you're required to make sure employees and customers are wearing masks in your establishment.
So the surge of COVID-19 cases sparking debate now over whether face masks should be mandatory in all public settings.
As the push for face masks continues on both sides of the Bay, commissioners in Pinellas County will consider 3 different mask mandates during their meeting today.
Similar rules are already in place in Tampa, St. Pete, and Hillsborough County. ABC Action News reporter Larissa Scott explains the options that they're looking into.
And one big debate now, do you have to wear a mask? The governor says you should, but stops short of requiring it statewide. That's up to local governments now, and it's pretty inconsistent right now.
I have a mask that somebody made me, and I can go like this.
Councilwoman Laura Pastor demonstrating how she wears a mask during a virtual council meeting as Phoenix becomes the latest Arizona city to mandate face coverings in public.
Tons of opinions on both sides. In just hours, Palm Beach County leaders will consider a proposal to require face masks in public places.
Healthy people are being warned against using face masks to protect themselves against the virus. As Justine Conway explains, experts fear incorrect use could lead to more infection.
Wearing masks like that is wasting a mask. That's a mask that won't be available when it's actually needed.
The state government's advice on wearing face masks is in line with the World Health Organization. Under its guidelines, masks should only be worn if you have a cough, fever, and difficulty breathing.
Medical masks like this one cannot protect against the new coronavirus when used alone. When you wear them, you must combine with hand hygiene and other preventive measures. WHO only recommends the use of masks in specific cases. If you have cough, fever, and difficulty breathing, you should wear a mask and seek medical care. If you do not have these symptoms, you do not have to wear masks.
From the streets of New York City to airports around the nation, we're seeing more and more people donning face masks after a handful of cases of the new coronavirus landed in the U.S. While it may make some people feel better to have them, the CDC says wearing a face mask to protect yourself from this new coronavirus is actually not recommended.
Well, at this point, Byron Lanise, the Centers for Disease Control says they are not necessary for people who aren't sick.
While face masks are currently required in some parts of China to prevent the spread of the deadly coronavirus. Furthermore, the CDC says while common surgical masks block the droplets coming out of a sick person from getting into the air, they're not tight enough to prevent what's already in the air from getting in.
Julian Huxley once wrote that the basic elements in cultural transmission and transformation are psychological. This is how we change. Since time immemorial, high rituals have been performed to transform reality. Ritual, a spiritual psychodrama of conscious, deliberate actions taken to facilitate change. Changes to the whole of the environment people exist in, starting with the mental landscape of the people themselves. the place where our reality is first born a dream. Artist Sharon Devlin once bluntly described the true purpose of ritual as being a method to alter one's mind. It's a sacred drama in which you are the audience as well as the participant, and the purpose of it is to activate parts of the mind that are not activated by everyday activity, she said. The mechanics of change through mechanism, a rhythm to sync to, merge and flow with, a magnetic draw drawing one down the path toward transmutation. Rituals are vehicles driving home those ideas. The information, the data, the symbols, which upon transmission create the language by which new society members communicate after they are initiated. This new language imparts a new understanding through definitions the ritual generates, meaning pegged to signposts of its own self-referential process, even if the original purpose gets lost in the repetition of action. A ritual initiation introduces and inducts one into the way, a new way of life or worldview, a program to guide beliefs and actions, enabling the initiate to become a full and true member of the new society. Note that ritual is not always a conscious action. Not everyone partaking in a ritual is always made explicitly aware that they are participants. And yet still, new patterns of thought, of significance, are drummed in, conscious or not.
Ladies and gentlemen, this commercial is going to use subliminal advertising.
An initiation ritual typically involves 3 stages. See if any of this sounds familiar to you. First, isolation for purification. The initiate is separated from the mundane. Did you know mundane means of the world?
Your school has been canceled, social events have been postponed.
The initiate is largely removed from the otherwise familiar persons, places, and things one is used to, in order to be cleared of them.
Stay home. Protect yourself. Protect our system. Stay home.
Detached and insulated. Purged. Purified.
An extraordinary time where we have to stay home. We have to stay physically distant from the ones we love.
An essential element of this separation from one's typical environment is the suspension of the normal rules of living that one is used to. The normal way.
Normality, as it was before, will not come back.
Much of the initiate's senses will be commanded and regulated at this time. In other words, the majority of what the initiate sees, hears, smells, touches, and tastes, if directly related, is deliberately controlled. These senses may be bombarded, modified, limited, or deprived. But regardless, perceptions and experiences are ultimately overseen by the high priests and priestesses directing the ritual's performance, enabling new light to shine through a newly opened window of thought, with nowhere else to go except where allowed. The insulated, isolated initiate may be forced to confront his or her own reflection, and inner shadows that have been ignored or buried somewhere deep beneath the average day-to-day suddenly become unavoidable. Triggers detonated. Another purge. Just as they involve surrender, initiation rituals may also involve sacrifice. Both the tangible that can be held in a hand and the intangible, such as behaviors, may be given up by requirement. After all, for something to be given, something must also be taken. A token of submission, an ounce of blood, a pound of clay to be remolded.
Society will undergo a radical transformation.
Whether dramatically overt or deceitfully subtle, the ritual reinterprets. A new definition given. Training in the form of new behaviors and knowledge, including myths and codes.
Our world is filled with codes, pacts, user agreements, subliminal messages.
Necessary for new members to function properly in the society they are being inducted into, are all imbued at this time. repetition is typical, as its use helps hammer the spell home.
A new normal? A new normal. We have to accept a new normal.
The wearing of masks may be required. Masking has traditionally played an important role in rituals of this kind.
Meantime, New York City has joined Los Angeles advising residents to cover their faces.
Well, they've announced that anybody who is flying on the plane is going to be having to wear a mask. See here right behind me, about half the folks in line at this market basket right now are wearing masks. Today there was a mandate that went into effect across the entire country to wear a mask.
Enabling and hastening the suppression of ego to help facilitate a death of the old identity before the identification with and manifestation of a new one. Disguised under a mask and hidden away, the initiate is more easily able to transcend the self, pushed further toward that invisible line between the physical and spiritual realms. Trauma is another aspect of this kind of initiation, and most especially to personalize the fear of death.
People are dying, and nearly 6,000 Americans have died.
Sometimes the act of dying is even ceremonially role-played. The dark beyond the darkness, the yawning abyss. Only after death is confronted can the initiate be symbolically resurrected, reborn anew.
To go to sleep in one world and wake up in another.
While the process that is playing out is quite coordinated and sophisticated in reality, it may be executed in a purposefully confusing manner, so that the goalposts seem to keep moving back and forth, up and down, here now there, rendering the initiate unable to find solid mental ground from which to make logical sense of anything.
We're trying to figure out how to do this every week because everything changes constantly.
This disorientation is key. The uncertain timing generates a general anxiety, further removing the initiate from reality and leaving him or her more susceptible to a type of Pavlovian conditioning. This weakens the defenses just as a virus would. Only this has the potential to break down the individual much more completely than a virus would.
I know we're surrounded by uncertainty.
Whatever the finer details, the previous way of life is shed like an old skin. At the end that comes before the beginning, the change begins. This is the second phase, the transition. As the old self symbolically dies and passes away, the initiate descends into a state of liminality, a sort of fever dream purgatory nowhere land, the void in the middle. Thus the old self dies as the initiate is purified. Now a white room, a blank canvas washed and primed and desperate for paint, a tabula rasa. At the same time his old existence and way of life dies, the initiate transcending it is gradually being processed, reprogrammed, and incorporated into his or her new environment, reformed, reconstituted, and rebirthed into the new world that awaits at the end of the tunnel. This is the final phase of the ritual, integration.
And everyone wants to know, is this the new reality? And as a new normal descends, it can feel so solitary, and yet we're all alone together.
Does any of this sound familiar now?
The clamor to improved contact tracing has seen nations like Israel, Singapore, South Korea, and of course China using a combination of location data, video camera footage, and credit card information to track and contain COVID-19 in their countries. The US has lagged behind, but Google and Apple are feverishly building a contact tracing platform scheduled for release in mid-May.
call to defund the police, widely discussed in the U.S., has also become a rallying cry for British Black Lives Matter movement.
Deployment of the planet's first robotic police units became the focus of the world in 2016.
Drop your weapons, you are under arrest.
Vincent Moore is a former soldier.
The problem with artificial intelligence is it's way too unpredictable.
The Scout's creator, Dion Wilson, sees a rich future.
What interests me is a machine that can think and feel.
For your own safety and for those around you, please stand at least 1 meter apart. Thank you. Please stand at least 1 meter apart. Thank you.
Now, new technology is being tested, allowing law enforcement to use drones to check the health or sickness of people on the ground, using virus-detecting software to recognize fever, coughing, and heart rate while keeping officers out of harm's way.
The idea of the robot actually was introduced by the mayor of the city of Huntington Park and the city council. The robot itself was given the name HP RoboCop. For Huntington Park. It's, rather a futuristic piece of equipment that essentially is a sophisticated, current time, high definition camera system.
West Australian Police will deploy drones to deliver messages to those not complying with mass gathering restrictions. They'll be fitted with flashing lights and sirens, the same as police vehicles.
We would like to remind everyone in the surrounding area to ensure they are social distancing.
They'll be capable of broadcasting a message to a range of up to 1 kilometre.
These drones will be used at parks and other places where people congregate and people are not adhering to the social distancing rules.
It is fair to say things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to basically the entire world.
When will a corona vaccine be ready? A vaccine that enables us to resume our lives without restrictions while protecting us from the disease.
The only thing that will really allow life as we once knew it to resume is a vaccine.
We should be and are and will be making a universal corona vaccine. To me, that's the best long-term goal for this.
This is a whole new era for making vaccines, and one that's emphasizing speed.
What we need is to make vaccines for 1 billion people, and we need to make that as quickly as possible.
Vaccines won't be ready overnight. They will take months.
Probably 14, 15, 16 months. At least 12 to 18 months away.
Until we have a vaccine.
Until we get a vaccine, new hope for a vaccine.
That's how long strict rules will be in place across the state.
It is fair to say things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to basically the entire world.
Joining me now is Jay Walker. He's the CEO of AppyJect, a company that entered into a $138 million deal with the Trump administration called Project Jumpstart. So what is Project Jumpstart?
It's a public-private partnership between my company, AppyJect Systems of America, and the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense. And its purpose is to ensure that by year end, we'll have at least 100 million doses ready to inject of a vaccine or therapeutic, assuming one is available. Eventually, what we're going to do starting next year is build entire new factories capable of doing up to 330 million doses every month, so that the entire U.S. population can be filled and finished from these brand new factories that we're building on U.S. soil.
How does the optional RFID chip work?
Well, each of these devices that are injected have the capacity to also have a small chip. What that chip does is it has the unique serial number for each dose. It is designed so that there is no counterfeiting. It's designed so that we'll know exactly that the right dose hasn't expired. However, that chip only refers to the dose. There's no personal information, no patient information. It's simply like a barcode, only we know instantaneously where and when that dose has been used. That also helps public health officials know when there are outbreaks, have we vaccinated enough people in those areas? That technology is purely optional, however, and the U.S. government hasn't even decided if they're going to use it.
Health Minister Adrian Dix says the provincial government is planning to move forward with mandatory reporting of vaccinations registration for school-aged children. And the system could be in place as early as September.
I'm very upset that I constantly be put in this bucket of being called a crazy anti-vaxxer. I'm a mum, and I'm here advocating for my child.
Candace Edwards and Allison Chapman have come to Beacon Hill to educate. There are moms who say their children's lives have been forever altered by severe reactions to vaccine. Right now, almost 80% of Massachusetts parents who choose not to get their children vaccinated do so for religious reasons. Representative Andy Vargas fears they are exploiting that loophole.
100% increase in religious exemptions to childhood vaccines since the 1980s here in Massachusetts. And it's kind of interesting to note that religious affiliations have been declining at the same time. So when you think about it, it's almost a violation of the spirit of the law.
But these moms argue only about 1.4% of children are opting out of vaccines, and they need options, and the reasons often overlap. The state's overall rate of vaccination is roughly 95%, among the highest in the nation. But a resurgence of diseases like measles has lawmakers questioning if it's time to do more.
Developing news, a vote to eliminate the religious exemption for childhood vaccines passed the Public Health Committee. The committee voted to push the bill forward 14-11. And as soon as that vote was made, angry demonstrators confronted lawmakers.
Scientists around the world have been racing to develop a vaccine for COVID-19. But what happens if people refuse to take it?
Anti-vaccine propaganda has long targeted immunization against childhood diseases like measles. But in the face of coronavirus, the campaign has mutated into something that could prove even more deadly.
There are anti-vaccine groups that are weaving a web right now, sowing seeds of doubt, developing their plans.
Scientists say any potential vaccine is still probably a year away, but the misinformation drive is already underway.
The world is becoming stranger than fiction. In what would make a good sci-fi book, MIT researchers have come up with an unsettling method of keeping track of who has and hasn't had a particular vaccination. They would create an ink that would be supposedly safely embedded in the skin alongside the vaccine itself, and only visible using a special infrared application. This is made all the more strange when we find that the research was funded by the Bill Gates Foundation. In fact, the project came about following a direct request from the Microsoft founder himself, who has been personally and somewhat controversially involved in efforts to eradicate polio and measles via vaccinations worldwide. Anyone who has been paying attention over the last 20 years has realized just how invasive government and private incursions into privacy have become. And we all know any form of identification or tracking is immediately suspect. Bill Gates and his foundation would effectively be tattooing vaccine records onto people by injecting a QR code under the skin with invisible nanoparticles. Of course, the safety risks involved have not been properly investigated. For example, Bill Gates Foundation came under intense criticism for its vaccination project in India in 2009, where 16,000 young girls, ranging from age 9 to 15, were given experimental HPV vaccine. Months later, many started falling ill, and by 2010, 5 had died. A standing committee on health and family welfare that investigated the studies in India tabled its report in 2013, finding consent for many of the conducted studies wasn't properly secured, in flagrant violation of medical norms. In many cases, children gave fingerprint consent for the test despite having no idea of the nature of the disease or the vaccines. And this is fundamentally where the problem of vaccines lies: lack of information and lack of consent. The public is kept in the dark for nearly everything involving vaccines. Of course, I'm not saying that back in the 1950s vaccines weren't a major help in wiping out polio and measles. I'm simply wanting to point out that as vaccines become more common, we must be hyper-vigilant of what we're putting into our bodies. Moreover, once it becomes socially acceptable to have something imprinted into your body in order to physically track you, how long until this becomes required? And I'm sure we can all imagine the danger that poses.
This is Aaron Russo, a filmmaker and former politician. To his left is Nicholas Rockefeller of the infamous Rockefeller banking and business dynasty. After maintaining a close friendship with Nicholas Rockefeller, Aaron eventually ended the relationship, appalled by what he had learned about the Rockefellers and their ambitions.
I got a call one day from an attorney woman I knew, and she said, "Would you like to meet one of the Rockefellers?" I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And we became friends, and he began to divulge a lot of things to me. So he said to me one night, he said that there's going to be an event there, and out of that event, you're going to see, we're going to go into Afghanistan, so we can run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We're going to go into Iraq to take the oil and establish a base in the Middle East, and we're going to go into Venezuela and try and get rid of Chavez. And the first two they've accomplished. Chavez they didn't accomplish. And he said you're going to see guys going into caves looking for looking for people that they're never going to find. You know, he was laughing about the fact that you have this war on terror. There's no real enemy. He's talking about how by having this war on terror, you can never win it because it's an eternal war. And so you can always keep taking people's liberties away. And I said, how are you going to convince people that this war is real? He said, but the media can convince everybody it's real. I mean, you know, it's just that you keep talking about things, you keep saying it over and over and over again, and eventually people believe it. You know, you created the Federal Reserve in 1913 through lies. You create 9/11, which is another lie. Through 9/11, then you're fighting a war on terror, and now all of a sudden you go into Iraq, which was another lie, and now they're going to do Iran. You know, and it's all one thing leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. Now, I would say to them, what are you doing this for? What's the point of this thing? You have all the money in the world you ever want. You have all the power. I said, you know, you're hurting people. It's not a good thing. And he would say, what do you care about the people for? Take care of yourself and you take care of your family. And then I said to him, what are the ultimate goals here? He said, the ultimate goal is to get everybody in this world chipped with the RFID chip. And have all money be on those chips and everything on those chips. And if anybody wants to protest what we do or violate what we want, we just turn off their chip.
That's right, microchipped. In 2005, Congress, under the pretense of immigration control and the so-called war on terrorism, passed the REAL ID Act, under which it is projected by May 2008, you will be required to carry around a federal identification card, which includes on it a scannable barcode with your personal information. However, this barcode is only an intermediary step before the card is equipped with a VeriChip RFID tracking module, which will use radio frequencies to track your every move on the planet. If this sounds foreign to you, please note that the RFID tracking chip is already in all new American passports. And the final step is the implanted chip, which many people have already been manipulated into accepting under different pretenses.
We have a Florida family who are really pioneers in a brave new world. They have volunteered to be the first ever to have microchip identification devices implanted into their body.
After 9/11, I was really concerned with the security of my family.
I wouldn't mind having something planted permanently in my arm that would identify me.
In the end, everybody will be locked into a monitored control grid where every single action you perform is documented. And if you get out of line, they can just turn off your chip, for at that point in time, every single aspect of society will revolve around interactions with the chips. This is the picture that is painted for the future if you open your eyes to see it. a centralized one-world economy where everyone's moves and everyone's transactions are tracked and monitored, all rights removed. The most incredible aspect of all, these totalitarian elements will not be forced upon the people. The people will demand them. For the social manipulation of society through the generation of fear and division has completely detached humans from their sense of power and reality. A process which has been going on for centuries, if not millennia. Religion, patriotism, race, wealth, class, and every other form of arbitrary, separatist identification and thus conceit has served to create a controlled population, utterly malleable in the hands of the few. Divide and conquer is the motto, and as long as people continue to see themselves as separate from everything else, they lend themselves to being completely enslaved. The men behind the curtain know this, and they also know that if people ever realize the truth of their relationship to nature and the truth of their personal power, the entire manufactured zeitgeist they prey upon will collapse like a house of cards.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 33.
Mandatory mask.
33. Mandatory.
33 require face masks.
33 deaths that we're aware of, sadly.
To be truly free is both very easy and very hard. We avoid the horror of our enslavement because it is so painful to see it directly. We dance around the endless violence of our dying system because we fear the attacks of our fellow livestock. But we can only be kept in the cages we refuse to see. Wake up. To see the farm is to leave it.